or the most popular Jewish food in the world. I did a Google search, and the top 10 Jewish foods always included on all the lists challah. Bagels was somewhere up there in the top 2, and latkes and burekas from Israel. I actually personally prefer halva, I'd put right there. But anyway, challah is definitely one of the top. And it's biblical. So, in this week's Parsha Shlach, there's a mitzvah among many other amazing, very dramatic stories. There's a mitzvah for one who is baking challah, preparing challah, to remove a piece of the challah and give it to God before we eat from it. The words are Reishis Arisosechem Tarimu Teruma LaHashem. From the beginning, from the first of your dough, you should raise up teruma, an offering, a donation to Hashem, and then technically it would give it to the Kohen in the time of the Beis HaMikdash to eat. Today, it is one of those ancient biblical mitzvahs right up there with mikvah for a woman who bakes challah, a man too, for anybody who bakes challah, but technically it so happens to be the nature of things that my wife bakes the challah and I eat it. Parenthetically, she bakes a really good challah. She uses white whole wheat flour and does also sourdough with the same. And you can either come, if you're local, to taste it for a Shabbat dinner or to bake it with her. She does that, no extra charge. So, Reishi Saros Sechem. So the Rebbe talks about this in probably hundreds of talks where the Rebbe pointed out various different angles and lessons from which we can learn from this mitzvah. The first one is as follows: Reishis Arisosechem Parimut from Hashem. From the first of your dough, of your batch, you should raise up and give an offering to Hashem. The Rebbe says, he quotes the Midrash, that the word arisa also means crib. It also means bed. Reishis Arisosechem. From here we learn a very simple, quick lesson that the beginning of our day, even while within our beds, Tarimu Teruma Hashem, we immediately start with the gift to Hashem. By what? You guessed it, by Modeh Ani Lefanecha. I give thanks to you, Hashem, Melech Chai V'Kayim, King who is alive and eternal. Shechazarta bi nishmati b'chama, that you return to me my soul with mercy, with compassion, with empathy, renewed, refreshed. Rabba Amunatecha, faithfulness is great, your faithfulness is great. I know you will do it again, and you trust in me to make this day special. So, that's the first thing. And the Rebbe says, how do we do that? How do we tarimu truma la Hashem? How do we raise this donation, this gift to Hashem from the Modeh Ani, from the start of the day, which then colors the rest of our day, which means all our lives, is by uplifting, by raising and uplifting all our interactions, everything we have in all our interactions to God. And how do we do that? The Rebbe explains, as we'll see further also, that this world hides God. It hides godliness. It has a klipa, a shell that covers. It's a facade that hides the fact that God creates and created the world. And really, the ultimate truth is Ein Od Milvado. There's nothing besides for God. Everything is all just Hashem. And we're all a part of that. But the world hides it well. So our job is to lift off that facade, that covering, that covers, that hides, some call it nature, and reveal the godliness within everything. That's one idea. The Rebbe was talking in this specific talk to counselors, and he was telling them that when you go out And just right before the summer, when you educate your campers, it should be recognizable in all of their activities that this is a Jewish child, this is God's child, whether they're eating, sleeping, swimming, other activities in sports. The Rebbe quoted all kinds of sports activities and said when they're playing with the ball and swimming, it should be noticeable this is a Jewish child. So that was the Rebbe's challenge to the counselors and to us as parents and to adults as role models. He said the best way children learn is by role models, by them following an example rather than just us telling them what to do, and we should have success in that. That was one idea. Moving on, the very intriguing Midrash that the Rebbe quoted, and he explores and analyzes it from many different angles. And the Midrash says, Kol ha-mekayim Mitzvah of Challah ki'ilu bitel avodah zara. Literally translated, whoever fulfills the Mitzvah of Challah, it is as if he canceled, he nullified avodah zara, idol worship. And the Rebbe goes on and continues citing the Midrash and says the opposite is true also. The kol ha-mevatla, the ha-mevatla, and the one who cancels, who nullifies the Mitzvah of Challah, ke'ilu kiyim avodah zara. It's as if they're upholding, strengthening, making exist avodah zara, idol worship. How could this be? Asks the Rebbe. Avodah zara, idol worship, is the exact opposite of our faith in God. Challah, the Mitzvah of Challah, is when you're baking the dough and you have about 4 or more pounds of challah. While it's still dough, or even afterwards, you take off a little piece, like a handful, make a blessing, and you take off the piece, and to separate the challah, and you designate it to God. Today, we don't have a kohen, we don't give it to a kohen, we actually burn it, and it's our offering to God. So the Rebbe asks, how is this seemingly simple mitzvah of taking off a handful of a large pile of dough compared to avodah zara, to idol worship, which is the backbone of Judaism? It's the first 2 commandments. It's believe in God and don't worship idols. How is the Midrash comparing challah? The Rebbe expands and says that challah is not something that's so expensive. If you have a big pile of dough and you take up a handful, it's not going to kill you financially. And who does it? Any man or woman can do it. They don't have to be a scholar or a teacher or a rabbi or a rebbitzin. Any man or woman can do it. And when is it done? It's not done on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, on holy days. It's done on Dafka, specifically on weekdays, because you can't bake on those other days. Actually, you could bake on Yom Tov, but anyways, it's done on a weekday. Long story short, the Rebbe asks, he says the proportionality is very different between Challah and Avodah Zarah. How is the Midrash comparing it? Such a simple mitzvah with a backbone of Judaism. And the Rebbe answers and explains. He says that, what are the steps to make challah? You need to have a field, you need to prepare the ground, you need to plow it, plant the seeds, you need to grow the produce, grow the grains, then you harvest it, bring it to your home, then you still can't eat it. You need to grind the wheat kernels until they're very small, to add water to them, and then bake them, etc. So, says the Rebbe, these are all steps that seem very, very natural and seem like it is one's effort that is actually making it happen. I planted, I harvested, I ground, or a friend of mine. But if you're doing it all yourself, it's more evident. You do all the steps that it takes to make challah, or really to prepare any other food. By extension, it seems like you are doing it, and all the credit goes to you, because you are the one who made it all happen. The first the Rebbe said was koichi va'etzem yadi asali es ha'chayil hazeh. It is my strength and it's my power that made this all happen. Where's God in the picture? Who knows? Says the Rebbe, a person making challah can fall into the trap of thinking that it is his or her own power that's really causing things to happen. And by extension, a person who's doing any kind of work, has any success in any business, in any field, anything in the world, you might feel, yes, it is I've got the power, I'm making it happen. The Rebbe says, the furniture in your house, one might think, I am so smart. My friends are telling me I'm a genius. I'm a good business person. I'm able to make deals and be successful. And therefore, I have the money to buy the furniture that I want and everything else in the house, etc. This is a trap, says the Rebbe, that God is putting us to a test. Because a person might say, wait, what about my neighbor? What about the millions and billions of people of the world who are not Jewish? And they don't have this mitzvah to believe that God is running the world and God is making everything happen. They too, the nations of the world, are planting and harvesting, reaping, sowing, and baking bread, just like I am. And they have no godly consciousness involved in the process. What about that? Says the Rebbe, that is the challenge. That's exactly the challenge that this week's Torah portion is. God is challenging us with by saying, yes, it's happening all over the world, and it seems like it's a natural process, but know that the truth is, ein od milvado. There is nothing aside from God, and God makes everything happen, including your intelligence and your abilities to plant and harvest and bake, and including the non-Jews and the other Jews and all the nations of the world and all the perspectives that are out there in the world. God creates everything, and it's there to test us, for us to dig deep and understand and recognize that really ein od milvado, everything is God, and the only true existence is because the Torah says Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning Hashem created the heavens and the earth and everything in between, and for the purpose Bishvil Torah, Bishvil Yisrael, Beis Reshis, two beginnings for the Torah and for the Jewish people to be light to the nations. Says the Rebbe, this is the challenge, and this is the challenge, and it's not, the Rebbe says, it's not tzedakah that you're giving a little piece of your challah to God. It's not charity. It's not like you're doing someone a favor. It's not yours. It's a debt. The whole dough is not yours. Every tzedakah that you give is not really yours. It's really just God's, and He can trust you in doing the right thing with it. And the Rebbe moves on and says that this perspective of that we plant and harvest, and it's really God that makes things happen, must extend to everything, to all our successes and all our businesses. And the Rebbe says that it's not so hard to recognize this when you are in a shul davening, when you are in a school studying Torah in a Jewish day school. And the Rebbe mentioned, he was talking in this talk to girls, and he said it's not hard to recognize this when you're studying in a Beis Rivka or a Beis Yaakov, like my daughter goes to. My daughters, all older daughters, went to Beis Rivka in their youth, and the current Mariasha goes to Beis Yaakov, Lower East Side, God willing, soon to Beis Rivka. But the Rebbe mentioned both of those schools and says it's not hard to recognize that God runs the world while you're in an environment, in a holy environment of a shul or a Jewish day school. The challenge is when you go out to the world, deal with the world, work with the world, and then you have success. That's when you start thinking, oh my, I'm good, I got this, I could do it, I'm making it happen. And that's where the Rebbe says it's our job. The beginning of your journey is in success, in any kind of success, is tarimu Challah Hashem, is to raise Challah to God, to elevate the world, to remove this facade that God created in this world that hides God's identity and reveal the truth within, the godliness within. And the Rebbe says this is mainly done by women, by the women of the world who bake challah, whether weekly or monthly or periodically, and they take off a piece of this challah. And the Rebbe quoted the prophet Yechezkel, who said that when a woman takes off a piece of challah and separates it to God, she brings blessing to her home and all the contents within her home, and her family, her husband, her children and grandchildren. And he said that this would be one of the mitzvahs that continue on even after Mashiach comes. So God bless you all. Let's understand the perspective over here. Beautiful perspective on Challah as a paradigm for us to understand that the best in the beginning goes to God, recognizing that everything is from God, and that elevates everything. Of course, it's not just that little piece of challah that becomes holy and special, but the whole challah, the whole dough. And by extension, when we give tzedakah, it's not just the tzedakah that's holy, but all of our belongings are raised and elevated and demonstrate that God runs the world, and ein od milvado. There's nothing besides for him. God bless you guys, and share.